When you use AI to repurpose, create, or improve content, who owns the copyright for the work that's produced? Is it you? Is it the AI? Is it the virtual assistant you got to use the AI, or something in the middle? That is the topic of today's episode, and I'm joined by Annabel Kaye, who's the founder of Coffee Clutch, who helps small businesses with legal contracts and agreements such as data protection, copyright, and virtual assistant hiring agreements. This is an area which was totally great to me, and I was quite surprised at some of the stuff Annabel told me on the episode. And do stick around to the end because we're sharing a link so you can get some discounts on Annabel's services. And I also share some systemized approaches to actually implementing the stuff she shares in this episode. And remember to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes on all things cool to help you create a freedom-driven business that gives you the lifestyle you deserve. So the question is this: how do entrepreneurs like us who don't have an endless supply of cash, how do we leverage the best apps, virtual assistants, automation tools and systems to scale our businesses, increase our profits and have more time to do what we love to do each day? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name's Dr. Steve Day and this is Systemize Your Success. Annabel, thank you so much for coming back on the show. I'm excited to chat with you today after receiving an email from you, actually. We were just talking about this before, how it's not very many people's who emails I actually open these days, and mine are all filtered by my assistant, but that yours is one of the ones I get her to forward because I always find it interesting and sometimes very relevant. And this was one of those cases. It was talking about AI, about copyright, about the grey areas of this at the moment. And I thought, what a great opportunity to get you back on the show and share your wisdom again and hopefully cast some light onto this rather sketchy area of copyright and law at the moment. So hi, Annabel, welcome.
Thank you for having me back. Yeah, we always get really technical things, by the way, don't we? And well, the problem with AI and copyright for most entrepreneurs is most entrepreneurs have got a very shaky grasp of copyright when it doesn't involve AI. So if you like, when you've got a change or a potential change that builds on something you didn't understand, it's much more difficult to adapt to it than if it builds on something you did understand. Axiomatically, really, isn't it? So what most entrepreneurs don't get about copyright, and this is true in the UK, but it's true in most of Europe, and I believe in America, it may not be globally true, is that whilst copyright in your works belongs to you, if you pay employees to create stuff, that copyright still belongs to you. If you pay an outsourced VA or graphic designer or web designer to do stuff, the default on the copyright is it belongs to them, unless it is assigned to you, which can be done through contract. It can be done in Germany only through specific types of paperwork. There are various ways it can be done. But we tend to think as entrepreneurs, because we paid for it, we own it. But actually what we've paid for is the right to use it. And the right to use it is not the right to repurpose it, edit it, sell it on, all these other things. So because we're in a muddle about that, we are completely rear-ended when it comes to understanding the effect that AI has on copyright. Because if something is 100% generated by AI, by a bot or an app that you're using, there have been two schools of thought on who that copyright belongs to, because obviously AI is not your employee and it's not you. So you can see where I'm going with this. One possibility is that copyright belongs to the computer code programmer who created the bot, because a bot is not a legal person, is it? Another possibility, which is in the early days of AI was mooted, was that there was no copyright, that because a bot is not an entity, short of giving data in Star Trek type rights to AI bots, it can't hold copyright because it doesn't exist. So for the last couple of years, that's been a bit of a debate while we've awaited draft legislation from Europe, America, all the rest of it. It's never quick. And at the moment, the balance of view, which may change, is that bots don't exist, they don't hold copyright. So what this means is if you are generating stuff 100% on bots and it's part of your brand, it's part of your IP, it's part of your content, and someone else copies it, You can't say you can't use that stuff because you didn't own it.
Can I ask a question? This may seem obvious, but how would anybody know whether it was you who created it or it was a AI bot that you used and then created it? Because the AI bot's not going to come chasing you, well, not yet anyway. The AI bot's not going to come chasing you and getting annoyed about infringement of copyright, which is what obviously is the risk if you copy somebody else as a human's work, is that one day they notice that you've copied them and they come knocking with their
No,
lawyers
I
and
don't
say,
think that's the risk. The bot won't care, right? But
yeah,
supposing I produce a Coffee Clutch branded download on what you need to know about transferring data overseas, but I've had no human input in that whatsoever. And I put copyright Coffee Clutch on it because don't we love to do that stuff? And I send it out in the world, and 2 months later, someone is circulating an identical download. And the only difference is they put copyright big rival on it, you know?
yeah.
And I go, how dare you use that material? It's mine. And they go, prove it. And I can't.
So it's in that element of proof then. So it's like you'd have to sort of have your
Well,
working
I
draft
can't get
or
a takedown order for breach of copyright. I can't do anything. And although in some areas of work, you're going to get similar things. You know, if we're explaining a similar law, we're going to use a similar structure. But bots can produce the same structure. They can produce all sorts of things. So it's going to get very murky. And obviously, if I'm in the content creation business and I use 100% bot generated content, and I say to you, I've done all this work for you, Steve, you owe me whatever, and I'll assign you the copyright. And I never owned it because it was 100% bot. You know, I've committed fraud because I've assigned to you something I
yeah.
don't own. And that's going to be a problem in people who are trying to outsource things that help build their IP, help build a scalable, saleable business. Because when you get to due diligence, they'll go, do you own all the copyright? And you'll go, yeah. And they'll go, well, show us how you know. So for some people, it
Mm.
would never be a problem. If a bot creates a social media post for me tomorrow, it's ephemeral, isn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. For other parts of what you're creating in your business, it's a problem.
So
If
it's just to sort of for me to weed this, get through the weeds, if you like, for my own peace of mind. So in my work, for example, like most of what we produce now, no, I'll actually say all of the copy I produce now definitely has a helping hand by AI. But the
absolutely.
content that we produce, so the subject matter, the knowledge and experience that's coming into the what of the content, that for me comes from typically my podcast. So I'll record a podcast and then I'll get a AI to transcribe it. That's still my copyright 'cause it's just my words. But then I'll get AI to take my transcript and to apply my style guides, my, everything I've put into my GPT agents to convert that transcript into a post that's written in my tone and voice. So the
Right. I think that's not uncommon. And I think the other common use is round the other way of um, maybe getting it to do a first draft and then putting your own spin on it. You know,
yeah,
those are the two biggest uses I'm seeing in my own clients. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I'm quite pro AI. But in that sense, what we're talking about is not AI generated, but AI assisted.
yeah, okay,
And if you like, in the era of assisted by AI, the issue is, did the human make, and this is a quote from various, consultative bodies and laws, a significant input, right? So if it produced a draft and you just went, I want the spelling to be American instead of English or vice versa, that's not really a significant input, is it? So you're going to have to look at if it's really important, what does that mean? Now we've only had one case determining this, which weirdly enough is in China. And before you go, what they think in China's got nothing to do with us, because AI is a global thing, copyright's becoming a global thing. It gives us a clue, and that was what I was emailing you about. And it was very much in line with how copyright's determined in the UK anyway, ignoring AI. So let's suppose you and I had a copyright dispute over something simple, like a book, right? And I said, you nicked my book. You just took my chapters and adapted them. And I went to an IP lawyer and you went to an IP lawyer. And what would they ask us to prove copyright? Well, I know from mine, because I've had to do it a couple of times. They go, well, we'd like to see the drafts. We'd like to see how you started it, how you changed it, what process you went through, and where you got to in the end. Now, as the author of a book, that will be a natural process. If the only thing you've got is a book, one draft, which starts with my copy, or vice versa, and then the amendments, it's fairly obvious who created the book, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the answer with a lot of this lies in record keeping. So if what the Chinese case said, which was very consistent with that, which is why I thought it was interesting, was if you're doing stuff that's intellectually important, keep a record. You've got your styles on ChatGPT, so you could go, this is the things I always use. But for important stuff, keep a record of the prompts and keep the drafts. So if it started with your verbatim transcript and you changed it, or it started with your idea and it wrote it, you should be able to see the iterations. Now, I'm not
Yeah.
saying for every post, but for anything important. So what we are doing progressively, we finished the UK round, we're starting on the global, it's been busy, is requiring people who create stuff for you to keep those records and hand them over if asked, so that if I then go on and publish a blog post and you go to me, Annabel, you stole it from my webpage, I can go, hang on a minute, this is exactly how it was produced.
Yeah.
Now, I say hand it over if asked because it shouldn't be a big deal to keep working records of what you're doing. I've got working records of draft contracts that go back to about 2018
Yeah.
reflexively because I need to know why did I change that? What went on? I don't keep
Totally.
working records of every social media post I've ever made. We'd all be bored to tears.
Well, I do, funnily enough. I arguably have records because I store everything digitally. I work in Google. I save everything to the Google Cloud. I don't go through and delete stuff. So I arguably probably have every draft of every email, every
Yeah,
social media post, everything I've ever done until AI ChatGPT started will all be saved in there. And now, because I've got a paid GPT account, ChatGPT account,
the
I've
back records
never
there.
deleted uh, anything from my GPT account. And
Quite,
now
me neither.
I use Fathom AI, another AI tool. But so I Fathom AI to record all of my meetings, and they apparently will store them indefinitely. And so that sounds like actually I'm doing easily
Yeah.
enough to defend myself should a case arise against me in
Absolutely, and not
inappropriately.
just to defend yourself, because not just defensive, but if you saw someone doing something that blatantly copied what you were
Yes.
doing, you might be able to stop them doing it because you'd be able to show that you generated it. And in order for them to show they generated it, they'd have to have the equivalent records.
Yeah.
And
And the great thing about digital stuff, which I've actually sadly had to use because I had to prove that one of my staff wasn't doing the work they were doing. And one way I could do that is actually all the audit trails within documents that are stored digitally. Like, for example, in Google, you can actually go through and see every single change that was ever made on a document at any time by
absolutely.
anybody, the IP address of the person that changed at the time, date, stamp, etc., etc. So if you need to go back and actually prove stuff, if you are drafting stuff, yeah, I'm sure if you've got notebooks, it's the same principle.
Oh
You'd
yeah.
be hard
You-
pressed to go and recreate 10 years worth of notes in date order in a notebook so to prove to try and cheat the system. So it's the same thing, just whatever it is you're keeping. That actually, if it's
to
digital,
keep
it's
it
super easy.
because if
Yeah,
it's valuable, you don't, I think the problem is when you think that the person you're paying is doing the work and they're not, if they're doing 100% AI and you don't know. Do you
yeah,
see what I mean? So, and
absolutely.
I think it's going to be established that with significant human input, you've got copyright. And this is the first case on what significant means, but it was very much in line with how we prove copyright in the UK anyway. And to me, it makes sense because we don't really want another method of doing things. Of course, for the people who don't do anything, and we get their emails sometimes, don't we? And we don't read them, right? There is no drafting. It's like tell ChatGPT, write me an email about bang and it's off. Mind you, I don't think I'd ever want to replicate that. But if ChatGPT replicated it again, which it might do on some random spin the wheel basis, wouldn't it? You couldn't really complain that someone else sent out an identical email.
No. Can I bring this? I like talking about really practical stuff when we're talking about things like this. And so one thing that we did, I actually recorded a podcast number 65, if you're interested, which dates back a good couple of years now, but exactly what you talked about at the beginning, Annabelle, which was about the copyright assignment. So I can't remember how I came across this, but I realized that actually any work that my virtual assistants were doing for me, if they were based in the UK, it would be black and white. They would that work would not be owned by me. I think it is grey how that would work across seas, like we mentioned before. But even so, I felt look, this is actually an important thing to at least put some things in place. So I now, as a standard part of my onboarding process, just have a simple copyright assignment document, which I assume you have something like that on your site.
It's embedded in the VA hiring
Yeah, okay.
contracts that we issue. We try not to have them all as separate documents because what we find with not just the people you send us, but the entrepreneurs we get generally is they've got way too much to do to remember to issue document number one,
Yeah.
document number
Well,
two.
I probably
You know,
missed that because I think I'll have to get. I'm now using your document, so I can actually probably ditch that
have a
for
look, have a look. We'll
But
go
yeah,
through
yeah.
it. And
So, and if anyone interested, just while we're on the subject, if you get head over to sys.academy/tools, you'll find a link to Coffee Clatch, which is Annabelle's company, where you can get a discount for signing up and getting things like VA contracts. And like we just talked about copyright assignment contracts. And those have recently been updated for the whole AI work. Is that correct, Annabelle?
the UK range has, the
UK
global
range.
range is next up. We
There you
were
go. It's coming.
actually
Yeah.
waiting. What we've been waiting on, which we now know is coming out in the autumn, is what's happening to cross-border data transfers,
Yeah.
which I know to most people is not an exciting piece of news, but it is for us because what we try and avoid is doing updates on the updates on the updates with people. Because when you've got all your team contracted, you don't want to go and the contract of the month is
Yeah.
but for people in support and your minimum support period is 6 months, you get free updates anyway. So,
Yeah.
um, and longer if you've picked different levels. So we now know what we need to do. We already know what we need to do about AI copyright. We now have a good idea what we need to do about cross-border data transfers. And the biggest problem we have, by the way, in terms of user experience with Coffee Clutch contracts is an interesting one. If you're on top of how data privacy works in the UK, even if you're a micropreneur, if you understand what a data privacy policy is, what data sharing with a third party is, the whole sharing it overseas in the Philippines thing is just an add-on.
Yeah.
What we find, and I'm not knocking anyone for this, I'm sure it'd be the same if it wasn't what I do for a living, is we get a significant subset of clients who know nothing about that, who therefore fall into this brick wall of why are you sharing this data? And instead of having one of the currently six statutory reasons, go because I want to. So they're kind of off page, they're like pre 2016 trying to deal with what are going to be 2025 updates. That's a big gap.
Yeah.
So, one of the things, and I was talking to someone else about it, was because we're entrepreneurs, we like to be lastminute.com, don't we? We want to go, I'm way too busy, get me a VA now, get them started on Monday. And then you go, I need to fill in the contract, and then you, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. And I think it's worthwhile if you've got the systems for it, and maybe it's something you can help people build to be able to get in when are you going to need to outsource module? Because if you leave it to the last minute and you randomly hire someone because you're busy, and then you randomly attempt to handle cross-border data sharing, particularly landlords and property people with ID and all sorts of really significant data, you're going to hit a brick wall of, I thought this was going to save me time, but actually just right now, this is costing me a lot of time because the time you should have spent over a year, maybe 2 years, is now having to be spent in a week while you get this sorted out.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because we have people who go through this, no problem, fine, I know what I'm doing. And you get other people going, what do you mean there are rules about what information I can share with whom? And they find it a little bit tricky. And I know you're great on systems. Have you ever built a system for how do you know when you're approaching that outsourcing moment and maybe not get there at
Yeah,
1 minute to midnight.
we do. It's called your personal systemization plan. It's module one of our free your time course. There you go.
Well, obviously, we need to get that out there to more people. Maybe we should talk about getting that out there because we
But
get
what we
clients with nothing to do with that course, you know.
Yeah, but what we also we don't do, which is a really good idea, explicitly, what we don't do is have a step by step getting ready for the data protection side of that as part of that process. We do have access to your site now. I actually worked with a data protection guy a couple of years ago, and he provided some access, but it was generic and it was overwhelming. The stuff I felt like for most people, it was just too much too soon. Whereas I think actually just putting some simple, like common sense steps in place, so that you're actually moving towards actually being in a position that actually when you do need to think about it, it's actually not a big deal. Like you said, you're educating yourself towards the goal rather than trying to do it all in one go. That is the key. And a lot of what we teach anyway, the principles, because I've been through this type of stuff myself and the training, like, so how we, for example, get people to set up the sharing of the shared drives and how they store things digitally and the sharing of passwords and the documentation and the audit trail. So all that kind of stuff we actually just get people into is because I've been through this and actually then realize, wow, I'm actually really in breach here, or oh, I'm really unprotected here. And so that's the way we guide people anyway. But it's not formally done with the view of, hey, this is also going to help you towards this data protection goal as well.
Yeah,
Annabel,
people don't realise that they need to look at their data privacy policy statement if they're sharing data, because VAs, self-employed VAs, whatever country they're in of third parties, you can't just let them all in and hope for the best. And if they're overseas, you need the right paperwork, but people need to know. And I certainly find in the landlord space and the property development space, where we get a lot of people using VAs in the Philippines, not necessarily from your customer base, but generally,
yeah, no, we have lots of property.
yeah, they're very,
Yeah,
very keen to email or scan someone's passport to a
yeah.
person at the other end of the planet. And when I go, that's not secure. Where's your data processing impact assessment on how dangerous that is? They go, what assessment?
Yeah.
I
Uh, uh,
shouldn't have to do this. I'm in a hurry. I'm busy. And it's like, I wouldn't. I mean, I'm lucky I'm nobody's tenant, you know. But if anyone ever wants my ID, even though it's a legal requirement, my first question is, who are you sharing it with and how is it being shared and stored?
and also these days, like there are apps, like there's one I can't remember my lawyer used last time I had to provide documentation, Seritas, I think, or something like that it's called. And you
Yeah.
basically, it's all digital. So you take the photo, it scans your face, like the banks use. So there are
Yeah.
ways to do this completely securely and never have to share it. And actually, you as the landlord of the property manager doesn't even need to see those documents because they're
Yeah.
all validated by a third party, and you'll pass a yes, this is okay, and that's it. That's all you need to know.
Absolutely.
So
And I
there are
think one of
ways.
the reasons they don't do that is they worry it's really expensive.
Yeah.
But nothing could be more expensive than emailing someone's passport to the other end of the planet and them suffering data theft
No,
as a result.
exactly.
That wasn't much of an economy drive. But also to me, it makes people look dodgy. You know, if they can't answer that
Well,
question,
anyway, you're talking to a landlord that when I started out, this was in my early 20s, I used to meet my tenants in the pub and hand over contracts over the table, and like literally deposits came in envelopes full of cash. And I thought this was totally fine and normal. Like you don't know what you don't know. So I completely understand when people do anything like this without ever seeing that actually that could be perceived as not quite as legit as it should be. I was totally honest. I wasn't doing anything below board at all. Everything was above board, is what I'm trying to say. But it's still, I can imagine looking back, I was like, wow. And the pubs we used to do it in, because where my houses are in Manchester, they weren't the nicest pubs in the world. So this probably could have easily had some problems from, you know,
that was probably before you had to look at their passport or their ID,
oh,
wasn't it?
way before any of that. I think we used to take photocopies. Anyway, we digress. There was a point, and we jumped onto a wonderful tangent there, which is actually very, very interesting. So I didn't want to stop you, but one of the point I was trying to make before was the practical aspects of this, and actually just thinking about when I'm hiring a virtual assistant. I mentioned the data sharing agreement that we've used, the copyright assignment agreement that we've used in the past. And I think that what I'm hearing from now is that they'd be useful to have this additional step, which would be in the terms of engagement or the hiring agreement, I imagine, would be about actually that this person should be, in all cases, sharing their working to actually to just to basically cover my own back is you because what we do is we have a shared drive set up in our we use Google, so our Google shared drive, and any work someone does for us, we don't just want to see the end product in there. We want them to have their working documents in there. We've always done this, but actually it's never really been enforced. And I think from now on, I think that's going to be actually something that's going to come into our terms. It's like actually from the first draft, everything has to be saved in that drive, and these are the reasons why. And if you can't deal with that, then we don't want to know. Or at least like for example, we have a team GPT account so people can actually log in. We store all of their chat history, so we can actually see that kind of thing going on and the videos that they record or their whatever they're using. Like we have team accounts for that reason, so we've got that history of everything that's done. So it's just made
But
me
yeah, at the
feel
same time, when it comes to personal data, although you want it all stored, what you don't want is everyone to have access to all the data.
yeah,
If you see what I mean,
totally.
which you go from what I call storing everything, which can turn into data hoarding, right? But also sharing everything, which can be really insecure because you want layers of who has access to what. So you might want a couple of people in an organization to be able to see anything. You might want other people who just want to see what their team's up to. But when it comes to sensitive personal data shared by your customers, like tenants' data or whatever, you might not want lots of people to see that because the more people see a passport, the more risk there is. And I know what entrepreneurs say to me, but I wouldn't hire people I don't trust. And it's like, well, of course not. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't secure the data. It's all about trust. It's about accidents, right? If I lose my laptop and it's open and not encrypted and I've got access to everything in your system, the risk to you is much higher than if I lose it and I've got access to a subset of your system, right?
Totally,
Doesn't mean I'm
totally.
not trustworthy. It means accidents happen and we're all people. Because presumably you wouldn't hire anyone you didn't trust, wouldn't I hope
Yeah,
not?
but also I'm sorry. I just think that's a bit of a naive way of looking at the world. That you will hopefully never hire anyone that you shouldn't trust. How on earth, when you hire somebody you've never met, can you trust them? You can
Right.
think they're a nice person, but you can't know. And I think
But
you've
even if
got
they're a
to.
nice person, they could be an efficient person and very nice. They could be sloppy about IT security and very
Yeah,
nice. And they may be morally trustworthy, but technically delinquent. I've met a lot of those.
totally. Or they could become over as incredibly nice and they could come over as very moral and put in a proper like a what's the word I'm looking for a looking at the other side of the fence, if you like, they could actually be an evil person coming to try and rob your data and sell it. And I
Right.
think you've just got to. So if you're just being naive and saying I would never hire someone who's not trustworthy, I think that's just looking through the world through rose-tinted glasses. Of course, we wouldn't want to do that, but we can't
Well,
always
we've
know.
all done it, even if we didn't want to.
Yeah,
And the difference between that and disaster was what they had access to and how
exactly.
fast we knew that something was going wrong.
I agree.
But yeah, I think you've got to trust people enough to hire them, but maybe not blind trust, isn't it?
Yeah,
But
100%.
I
You can
think
do
a lot of
background.
entrepreneurs are like that because for many people taking on, I think there's two categories of people taking on a VA. People who have run an employed team before, which VAs aren't employed, either in an executive position and they know how reliable or not people are. And there are people who have never had a supervisory or team leading role who've gone out and created something. And if you like, their first hires are outsourced. And in that sense, they don't have the hinterland in their mind of what happens when you work with people. They just think, well, I asked them to do it, so that's what they'll do.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have been a boss that long before you realize that's not the whole picture.
No. And even with people with the best intentions and like you say, the total moral compass in the right direction, actually they just are either lazy or they don't have attention to detail or they're busy and they forget something or they're tired or whatever it is. And it's too easy for things to be done. So like when I worked in the hospital, I ran a chaired, I should say, a committee called the Lessons Learned Committee. And it was always about how to look at patient safety incidents, or in this case, with data protection incidents. In my case, it was patients. And it was basically looking at how do we improve the system to avoid this ever happening again? Because we can't trust the people, because the people are human and humans make mistakes, and that is inevitable. And that's the only thing we can guarantee is the mistakes will happen again. So how do we build a system better so that actually those mistakes don't have the impact in this case it did? And that's what really got me into the world of what I do now. And this is a great example of that, is actually being mindful of the things, your protections and everything you're putting in place, the barriers you said to who has access to all the things you just mentioned, Annabelle. Like if that's the mindset you go into this, then it doesn't matter. Okay, but it's not as important when something goes wrong, because you've done everything you can to minimize the impact to both you and the potential.
Completely. And the only thing I would add into that statement and that process now is be aware of the fact that AI can make mistakes. It can and it does hallucinate data. You need to watch your settings if you're doing data analytics on anything confidential or personal, so it's not feeding it back into the general learning pool.
Yeah.
It's not infallible. I have hours with ChatGPT all the time and I go, what the hell? That's absolutely wrong and you know it. And it'll go back and go, I've checked it again. You're right. I even got it to apologise to me the other day because I had to make it go back 3 times.
Mine apologise all the time. It says, "Oh yes, thank you. You're right. Thanks for missing that out. Sorry for the oversight." That's one of my favourite comments. Sorry for the oversight. I'm like, anyway, that's
I
not
don't
got
have
answer.
any VAs, by the way, who are as absent-minded as ChatGPT is. I don't think it's ready to take over the world. It's great at crunching data really quickly, but it actually does run out of memory and miss bits, doesn't it?
Yeah, and as you said, it just makes stuff up. It just wants to please you. As long
Yeah,
as
it'll
it,
say anything you like. It's like, I always think it's like that boyfriend when you say, does my bum look big in this? It always goes, no, of course not. You look wonderful. And then you wear that frock and you think someone should have told me. You know, I'd prefer the one that went, well, this really isn't the outfit for you, you know?
I really like that black one.
Yeah. But it is, I don't, when they put the personality in it, they gave it the personality of a spaniel for some reason. Always wagging its tail and trying to sit on your feet, you know?
Totally.
And yeah, it has its limits. And so I would say the same, that you need to put in systems to think, do I want to just rely on that as if it was like the Oracle of Delphi? And or am I actually going to have checks and balances on what it produces and what I accept from it? I mean, a number of times I've had to say to you, go back and do that again and take out the following sources, which are nowhere reliable sources of information on anything, not even the weather, never mind what we're chatting about. And then it'll come back with a different point of view. It's like having a willing child who does their homework on drugs, I think.
Fantastic.
At least
And
that's what I get out of it. Maybe I'm rubbish, but I'm always arguing with it. My husband will go, what are you arguing with the computer about? And I go, well, that's just wrong. You know, I don't mean wrong as a matter of opinion, but today
factually wrong.
is Thursday. What do you mean you're telling me it's Friday?
Yeah.
That kind of wrong. But
No, I completely agree. I think, yeah, got to take everything with a pinch of salt.
so, we
Annabelle,
build systems, don't we? And within that, we build paperwork to require the people we work with to follow sensible systems. And you could put the whole across border data privacy under that heading, right? If you kind of got it, because for all the jargon and all the language and all the fuss, that's ultimately what we're asked to do. And we don't even have to name it in weird bureaucratic language as long as we comply with it. But to go stuff and nonsense, who cares? Is otherwise it makes an unstable business as you grow, doesn't it?
yeah, it does. Annabelle, I'm going to have to draw this one to a close, although I could chat to you for hours, and I always enjoy our conversations.
Oh,
And
Joy, I'll
thoroughly.
try one day to write an email you like again, only because
Yes.
But I haven't written one since, by the way, because I hate filling people's inboxes with loads of blah. I only write an email when I feel I've got something useful to say.
Yeah, I think that's a very good strategy. That's one I've tried to do for over the years as well. Which I only record the podcast when I got something hopefully interesting to say. Otherwise, if I can't think of anything, then I interview someone interesting like you, and I can ask you all the questions instead. So yeah,
Or
thank
we
you
could
very
get ChatGPT to go, lessons have been learned.
exactly. Yeah. I have ChatGPT. I did do it. Yeah, I've not done an interview with ChatGPT on live yet. That's a good one. I'll try that one
See if
if I
we
can't
get any
find a good
sense out
guest.
of it.
Yeah. Fantastic. Annabel, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Just
Thank
in case
you.
if anyone wants to find out how Annabel can help with contracts, with legal advice on all this kind of stuff we've been talking about, then head over to sys.academy/tools and you'll find a link on there and you'll get a bit of a discount using our affiliate link as well. And finally, please do subscribe. Hit subscribe right now. Share this with your friends and loved ones. Anyone who you know who runs a business you think would find it interesting to know a little bit more about AI and copyright. And in my opinion, that should be pretty much every business owner you know. Annabel, thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure. I'll see you next time.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye now.